I'm Amy Kingdon from BRG, and you're listening to the ThinkSet podcast, the official podcast of BRG's ThinkSet magazine. Each quarter, ThinkSet gathers expert insights that help today's business leaders prepare for what's next. Our new issue is titled Changing Values, Decentralized Disruption, and provides timely analysis on crypto, digital assets, and blockchain. You can read it now at thinksetmag.com.
Welcome to the ThinkSet podcast. I'm Kevin Hamilton, a managing director with the Global Applied Technology team, here with Michael Canale. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Mike Canale. I'm a managing director in our financial institutions advisory practice. So I lead up our fintech and crypto advisory teams from a financial institutions perspective. And then I also work very closely with our restructuring team at BRG.
Great. And Mike and I are both in the cryptocurrency group, blockchain, and digital assets group for BRG. So we're going to talk about tokenomics today, which actually we're just finishing a project on tokenomics, and I think it's a particularly interesting topic. It's not often in life that you get to design an entire economy. And so, Mike, you want to introduce tokenomics to start with? Like, what is it? And we can go from there.
Yeah, so a big part of a crypto project success is directly attributed to its tokenomics. So, and that's a catch-all for all of the elements that make a particular cryptocurrency valuable and interesting to the market. That can include everything from like the token supply, how it's issued, what utility it has, the purpose of the coin, et cetera. So, in general, for a token to be successful, there has to be a really smart, well-designed incentive structure for investors to buy and hold tokens over the long haul. In general, what you see is that projects that really think through this and have a good strategy and documentation around it are more successful than those that don't build really good ecosystems around their tokens.
Something you said there is really important because we've seen this before. There has to be a reason for the token to exist.
Right.
So one of the things we do early on when we're working with a new digital asset Web3 type company is talk to them about why does the token exist if they want a token. There was a point in time when everybody wanted a token. They created tokens just to have them, but there really wasn't a reason for them to exist. And that was something that we've blessedly gotten away from now with these more recent projects. A lot of what we're doing is helping them to design how does the economics of their project work and how does their internal token work. So what are some of the reasons that a project might want a token, Mike? Because not all of them have it, but when they do want to have one, what is the point? Why would you want one?
Yeah, there's a couple of different reasons to have a token. Maybe it would be good to talk through like what the different types are. So there's means of payments tokens. So those enable users to buy goods and services using the token, right? There's governance tokens. Those allow token holders to participate in network protocol or, overall project governance. So they're voting on things that are directly going to impact the strategy and the way things work. There's staking tokens. So that's where holders can stake their coins, take them out of circulation, and they receive financial and other rewards for doing so. And then there's security tokens. So those grant partial or total ownership of a real world asset. So that can be things like real estate, it can be art. And why would a project want to have a token? Well, it basically makes things a lot more sticky from a customer perspective, right? Like if you're buying those tokens, staking those tokens, using those tokens to participate in the project, you're more likely to stick around and buy more. That's essentially what's at the heart of all of this. And then the value of that token, if it keeps going up, that may attract other interest, it may attract other investors. So there's an incentive for the project to do a really good job on managing things like supply, burns, yields, et cetera, in order to help drive price.
No, that's great. I think that we'd probably be remiss without mentioning that this is a very controversial area, obviously, with the Securities and Exchange Commission looking at these tokens of whether they actually are securities. And Mike and I, neither of us are lawyers, and so this is definitely not legal advice in any way. But I think that it's going to be very interesting how this develops over time, whether some of these tokens are ultimately deemed securities, whether most of them are deemed securities. That's certainly beyond the scope of our conversation today, but I think that that is certainly a consideration that people need to make as they look at these different tokens. So, presuming we have a project that wants a token, when it goes right, I think you're spot on. You get really customer stickiness, almost like joining a team, right? You put on the jersey of the team you join, and you get a hat that says the company name, but you actually have the tokens instead. So it really does drive that stickiness. I think you can do pretty clever things with the token, but I think we also have seen occasions where things have gone horribly wrong. So do you want to talk about, so what are some of the pitfalls? What can happen when it does not go very well?
Well, if there's not a well thought out, well marketed, you know, strategy behind a token, just simply putting a token out for the sake of putting a token out, which I think we saw a lot of that over the, past year or two leading up to the bear market. Like everybody and their mother was putting a token out and hoping it was going to go to the moon, and they really hadn't thought about like, hey, why am I doing this and what's it going to be used for? From that perspective, it can, alienate people. It can feel a lot like a rug. Why did I put my money in this? There's no value here. It really comes down to understanding like, why are we creating this token? What is the potential market for it? Because there's not necessarily a market for every single type of token, right? And that's one of the things that we do when we're advising clients is we actually go out and look at the size of the total accessible market and figure out like, hey, are these valid assumptions to be putting into a model? There should be a model behind the token, and there's lots of different inputs that go into that. Having very well thought out assumptions, having really solid mechanics around managing the total circulating supply. How are you going to burn tokens and reduce supply to maintain price? Or if the team itself, like I think one of the biggest pitfalls that we've seen is a lot of dev teams award themselves significant amounts of tokens, and in the beginning you'll see this nice price appreciation, then all of a sudden it drops off a cliff when the market floods with more supply because they're all dumping it. So there's a lot of pump and dump schemes, games getting played, then that subsequently makes customers very hesitant to put their money into projects that are focused on tokens.
That's spot on. It's a fascinating topic, and I think one of the things that we're able to bring to the table as BRG is we have a lot of economists on staff, and I think that we are bringing economists along in partnership with our quote unquote Web3 native people like Mike and myself to help to design these token economies. And I think it's really interesting conversations that come to pass, where we find our economists get pretty excited as they get to actually design an entire economy from scratch and how things work. But you're spot on. Sometimes you see overly complex tokenomics models where the token's trying to do too many things. And you hit on one of the big ones where the initial distribution of token, which tends to be one of the riskier parts of a tokenomics or frankly, a whole project, if it's accrued too much to the developers and the initial investors, and then you get weird things that happen if the vesting schedules aren't set up correctly. And so that's all things that we would work on with our clients of how do they appropriately have vesting schedules so we don't have massive amounts of tokens that can dump into the market. And then what is the token used for? And I think that without naming names, we have a project that we're just finishing. It's a particularly interesting. The token can be used for all sorts of different things, whether that's to play a game or to have governance decisions. And so I think we see tokens that are designed with kind of a hybrid of several of the mechanisms you talked about. They're both governance tokens and they're utility tokens, and potentially there's even models where there's a two token design. And so, do you want to talk about one token, two token designs real quick? Kind of introduce people to what that means and why you would want one versus another.
So in the two token design, you usually see a governance token that's, stripped out from the means of payment or medium of exchange token. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? So the two token model awarding governance to those that are either early investors or, big participants in the ecosystem makes a lot of sense. Tying all of that into a single coin kind of dilutes the value of having a separate governance structure. So the two token model is pretty common, but it does add some complications to valuing the two separate tokens and then, how they interact together and how they ultimately get used in the ecosystem. It's extremely important from a strategy perspective to have, like I said earlier, very well documented purposes for both tokens. And then from a financial modeling perspective, it actually complicates the valuation techniques used because you're now using different formulas and combining assumptions and building out a much more complex ecosystem. So from a documentation and modeling perspective, it definitely requires a different set of expertise to model those two things in conjunction with one another.
Yeah, two token models are complex, but there's good reasons for both two and one token models. From our perspective, as we wrap up on tokenomics, it was a very quick spin through of this topic.
Mm-hmm.
It gets much deeper, and I think that as we look at whether it's a Web3 native project that's starting from scratch and they don't have a company that's already started and they want to have a token, those are things that we can help design how the token interplays with their customers and what their ultimate plans are. And then projects where it's a company that already exists and they're transitioning part of their project into a decentralized autonomous organization where they're essentially giving over parts of their company to a community that's going to be governed by a token. And those are all things that we have helped on and we can continue to help on. Any final parting words for us, Mike?
I would just add on to what you're saying. Building a tokenomic strategy is a lot like building out a business plan. And we do that sort of thing all the time, both with traditional finance businesses and Web3. So it's really marrying that combination of expertise together to help our clients, create that strategy to, really produce a solid tokenomics project.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it and look forward to talking more about tokenomics with you.
Me too. Thanks, man.
This ThinkSet podcast is brought to you by BRG. For more insights on crypto, digital assets, and blockchain, check out our new issue of ThinkSet at thinksetmag.com. You'll find articles that cover everything from crypto regulation and blockchain applications to IP in the metaverse and more. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, position, or policy of Berkeley Research Group or its other employees and affiliates.